Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Chirrut Imwe and a few of the different events that happened around him in Rogue One. So, he is a really interesting character. So one of the things some of the obvious events that happened around him were, of course, when he was surrounded by, it was his introduction. One of the big events was when he was surrounded by those stormtroopers. He took out a whole pack of stormtroopers on his own with his staff, and that was a major scene with him in it, right? We also there was also, of course, where he takes down a TIE fighter and careens that TIE fighter into a gun emplacement, right? Single-handedly takes out probably 5 or 10 people, that are fighting against the Rogue One team that really hasn't even named itself the Rogue One team yet, right? So, really, really fascinating ability to do combat. What I want to talk about today are two areas where Chirrut does things in the film that are not combat based. So, what are some of the other powers of Chirrut? How does he interact with the other characters, and what is the abilities that he shows there, right? Well, they're really quite interesting. So the first one is, and I believe this is his introduction. So his introduction in the film is he is just sitting in a corner in the Holy City, and Jyn Erso, walks past him, and he calls out to Jyn, and he says that he will trade her for that necklace she has, right? And Jyn comes over and she looks at him, and and I think it's a great introduction to Chirrut Imwe, where as soon as Jyn looks on him, she literally kind of stops in her tracks, because she's like, oh, this, I think she's shocked by him. One, to see that he's blind, right? Because she's being talked to by someone who is blind, right? So that's different, right? And you don't see that. That doesn't happen to you every day for every person. So I think it just kind of stops her in her tracks. And then also, her necklace is really precious to her. It was given to her by her father, Galen Erso, and it's this really special memento, right? What's interesting is, now as I'm thinking about the film, so one, she says to Chirrut, hey, how do you even know that I have a necklace on? And then we see Jyn, and it's clear that not only is her necklace under her shirt, but she has this cool scarf on over that. So there's 2 or 3 layers over. You cannot visually see this necklace, which really brings the question back. There is no answer. So Chirrut, he says, to know that answer will cost you. Now, one of the things that's funny is when we meet Chirrut, it looks like he's a beggar, right? It looks like he's just a blind beggar. Right now, the reality is he is a disciple of Kyber who is struggling, because it's really difficult to say what disciples of Kyber do in the Holy City now that these Kyber crystals that they used to worship and revere and preserve are now being just strip mined and being used for fuel for a death weapon. That is, man, the more you think about Chirrut Imwe, the deeper you understand this character is. This is a guy who everything he stood for, everything that was important to him in his world was just turned completely upside down. And yet he is not, he's not sent into a depression. He's not sent into ineffectiveness. He is alert and ready and poised to take action, right? And we see this in this very simple interaction with Jyn Erso. And so now, one thing that's interesting though is it really makes me wonder, and the fun thing is we can speculate now. How did he know that necklace was on her? Okay. Now here's my take on this. All right. So one, I truly believe that Chirrut Imwe is a force dedicated. I think he is something that we've never seen before in we've never really seen anything like him before in Star Wars. A Force user who essentially we've seen Force users before. We have seen now with him, we're seeing someone who is really dedicated to the Force, but is not a Force user. And so I come from the very distinct impression that he cannot use the Force. He really can't, right? So now I think what happens though is the Force has the ability to affect the Star Wars world. And I think the Force reads his faith and then kind of makes a pocket in the world that protects him, right? And what is that pocket? Well, the biggest part of that pocket to me is clearly Baze Malbus. I think, the Force has positioned Baze Malbus to always be around Chirrut Imwe so that he can do what he needs to do, right? So there is this idea that, hey, did he force sense that necklace? Did he force sense that piece of Kyber? And I think the answer is no. Force sense is, we've seen Jedis use this all the time, in heightening their senses, connecting with the Force directly to get an advantage on perception, to see things that a normal person couldn't see, to hear things, to smell things, to even just sense them at the highest level, Now, I don't think that's the case. In my opinion, I know this is strange, but I actually think he smelled that necklace, right? He smelled the Kyber itself. Now, how would he do that? How do you smell a rock? I mean, that's ridiculously difficult, right? Well, I think there is precedence for this, and the reason why is, one, every object that we have, especially if an object is on us all the time, is going to just leave the smallest traces of whatever it is on us, right? Now, I know Kyber is incredibly tough, but even if it was a few, often when you're measuring things in science, it's a few parts per million, right? And I think that's just it. I think there were just a few parts per million that caused scent on her, right? And so I think he smelled the Kyber crystal. That's my thought, right? But it also, forces you to think, is he Force emergent, right? Or is he Force dedicated, or is he a Force user, right? Force emergent would be somebody who is emerging into their Force powers. I truly believe that Chirrut Imwe has no Force powers, right? And so, that I think is really key to understand that. So that's my take on him talking about the necklace. It's really exciting to continue to be talking about Chirrut Imwe, because he's just such a special character in the Star Wars world. And, just talking through the necklace, it really strikes me that, Chirrut Imwe is in the Holy City. He is in a place that used to be this reverent, sacred place for him. And Kyber crystals were treated with respect and with sacred reverence, right? And now, Kyber crystals are just something they're going to drop in, that the Imperials are going to drop in. Now, what's interesting is the Kyber crystals have always been used to power lightsabers, right? So, yeah, it's really fascinating. I guess, boy, that really does bring up a big question now that I think about it. So we're supposed to think, oh, that's terrible. They're just going to strip mine these Kyber crystals and drop them into a death machine. But isn't that just a larger thing that the Jedi were doing for centuries? The Jedi were already taking Kyber crystals and putting them into weapons. The Jedi started that process. They were doing it at a much lower level, and also I think it was part of their, it was really part of. It's very clear that the Force and people's reactions to the Force is really starting to unfold as a religion, which is, wow. It's really thought provoking. So while I definitely think you should not, strip mine resources and drop them into a death weapon that destroys planets, it really does make me think, wait, I think the Jedi started this process of going and getting Kyber crystals and putting them into a weapon, right? So, wow, that's really kind of eye-opening. So that, and I think that's what, and my ending point is that's why I think so much of the Chirrut Imwe character is, he is so unique and is such a new, awesome addition to Star Wars that we get to see Star Wars in a new light. And that's the very, very cool thing about Chirrut Imwe. I think that's it, and have a great day. Take care, everybody.